Well, hello again, everybody. This is John Norris at Trading Perspectives. As always, we have our very good friend, Sam Clement. Sam, say hello.
Hey, John. How are you?
I'm doing okay today. I wish I could say I was doing absolutely fantastic, but every time I read the news, I read the headlines, it seems as though there's something else out there that, frankly, for an old guy like myself, I just kind of scratch my head a little bit.
Yeah.
Each piece of news is just crazy, it seems like. You know, people getting in fights in grocery stores because they have to wear a thin mask or something along those lines.
Yep.
I'm sure everyone's seen that viral video of that woman absolutely losing her mind in the grocery store. But unfortunately, that's not really all that uncommon. That's just the one that went viral. I mean, my wife is an audiologist, and she can number of people that show up just unbelievable, refuse to wear masks.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I mean, I've read headlines today that people are upset because the stage play Hamilton isn't woke enough.
Yeah.
It's probably the most woke stage play about one of the founding fathers ever in history, I mean, without a doubt, but it's not woke enough. And obviously there was a lot of consternation about tearing down Confederate statues. And then once we got finished tearing down the Confederate statues, we started going after Christopher Columbus. And then we go after, I mean, just about anyone. And then they started,
Douglass was the one that...
tearing down Frederick Douglass. Tearing down. I mean, just so I read all these headlines, and it's all this stuff, and just like, what kind of world in which we live in? And Sam, you and I were talking about this one, buried back in the headlines. I think, at least on page A2 or 3 or whatnot, was a little blurb that could change higher education for the remainder of my life, and certainly maybe the remainder of yours as well. And that is, Harvard University is going to put all of its classes online.
Yeah, and Harvard is I mean, it's the university in America that people think of. I mean, it is
the university of record, I guess. And
yeah.
My apologies to people from Princeton, Yale, and I mean others in the Seven Sisters. Harvard is the university of record.
Yeah, I mean, it's the top university. I mean, for all intents and purposes, and
with the exception of Wake Forest University
Wake Forest
and Auburn, yeah.
The State College of Alabama. But no, I mean, we've seen probably some other colleges, and you know, I didn't really think anything of it when some smaller college decides to go all online for the year. That's one thing, but then people kind of pay a little bit more attention when it's Harvard University that is basically making all classes online. I think you said that they can still attend campus.
So, yes, the students still
but the
can.
classes are all online, and tuition is still the same, around $50,000 a year, and that's you know, I feel like Harvard's one of those schools that others are probably looking at. They go, okay, if Harvard's going to do it and Harvard's going to go all online and still charge the same tuition, maybe that means we should probably do it.
Well, I mean, so what do you think that really means, like, for the college experience? I mean, because it's been some time ago that I was a college student. I mean, I graduated in 1990 from Wake, and obviously we didn't have the internet or what have you. The only person that had the internet back then was Al Gore, of course, because you know how instrumental he was.
He invented it.
He designed it. But it was a little bit different. I mean, the thing about being able to take classes elsewhere, as opposed to on campus, just was so much science fiction. So my experience is, it's hard for me to wrap my brain around being able to have a college experience, having the interaction with the professors. Not that my interactions with professors was really all that positive all the time, but having that same level of interaction and the same level of just social interaction with people, and just learning to be able to handle yourselves in society. For me, taking all the classes online, having a fully internet or digital experience for higher education, to me seems, well, fine, we can get the textbooks out of the way, but we're missing out on a huge part of what a higher education actually is. However, Sam, you just graduated from college just a few years ago. Yeah. I'm not sure if your generation or you would feel the same way as I do.
Well, my thoughts on it are, so we can focus on Harvard for a second, is one, they're allowing people to come back to campus.
Yeah.
That is a lot of what, when I first hear classes are going all online, that goes, oh, that sucks. People are going to miss out on the quote-unquote college experience, the stuff outside of the degree. And then my other thought on it is they're still charging the same amount. So, yes, that sucks, but I think that kind of shows that what you're really paying for with that college degree is that piece of paper for all intents and purposes, where you're getting the degree from. And that is maybe not to the individual, but to the working world, that's the probably most important thing you get from going to college is that piece of paper saying that you graduated, and that value is still there. And so maybe I'm wrong to think that, but I don't have a whole lot of issue with them charging the same. Maybe obviously not including room and board and textbooks and things that you're truly not using anymore if you're not going back to campus, but it still holds the same value.
Well, Sam, you're hitting a lot of nails on the head there about what the true value of a college degree is, and you're making the argument that perhaps it's more the diploma itself, the sheepskin, if you will, than the actual education that's involved with it. And I would tend to agree with you, perhaps certainly up to a point, but agree with you because I don't mind telling you. I went to Wake Forest, and as you know, considered a better school out there, particularly in the South, and that's where I got my undergraduate degree. However, I got my graduate degree at a place called University of Baltimore, which is a tertiary school. But I got it at night while I was working full time in Baltimore, and had to work nights and got it. And I don't mind telling you, I probably learned more at the University of Baltimore, more things that were applicable to my daily life than I did at Wake Forest, although Wake Forest has a much loftier reputation.
Yeah.
And I think anyone in their right mind would say that a sheepskin from Wake Forest is probably worth more in the workforce than one from the University of Baltimore, although I would say that the education that I got at University of Baltimore was at least as equal to what I got at Wake.
Yeah. I think the two most important things, or the two things you're really paying for, are the piece of paper and then the social aspect of it, which it is an important thing. And I guess there could be an argument to be made there that if you're missing out on all that stuff, that maybe you shouldn't be charging the same amount. But leaving that aside, I mean, the education itself, I think you brought up a good point that you feel like you got a better actual education. You learned more applicable stuff at University of Baltimore than Wake Forest. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. They take their degrees, they use the degree itself to get the job, and then they learn what they need for the job on the job a lot of times.
I'd say more than a lot of times.
I'd say most people outside of probably some specialized degrees, maybe building science at Auburn is one I think of, or computer sciences and some engineering stuff and mathematics. You get my point though, is a lot of this, no matter what your job is, you're going to be learning the stuff for the job on the job. So what value you get is your employer believes you're smart enough and capable enough to do the job because you have the piece of paper and the GPA along with it.
Yeah, without a doubt. I would tell you that I had a close friend of mine back in college who ended up going to Fuqua Business School at Duke University.
Yeah.
And he said that it was ridiculously easy compared to his undergraduate experience at Wake. And he said probably the reason for that is the presumption that if you could get into Fuqua, you already knew what you were talking about.
Exactly.
And so that was a huge chunk of it. But going back to Harvard, and you're absolutely right. I mean, all this is the presumption of marketability with the Harvard degree or what have you. What I am going to find very interesting moving forward is just how much the academic establishment is going to be behind this in 3, 4, 5 years times hence. Because I will tell you right now, Sam, college administrations will find out that they can, with all online classes, all Zoom classes, what have you, whatever the application that they use, they don't need as many professors
or buildings.
They don't need as many professors in order to teach those classes. If you can have a Zoom class with 300, 400 students in it for just about any class, and then also I'm going to think this is where I might be wrong on this. I also think it's going to be more difficult for those college professors, those in academia who are bent this way, to indoctrinate their students in some form of political thought. It's going to be far more difficult to do that in an online environment than it is in person, I would argue. And it's also going to keep the professor's comments in an online classroom far more on point than it would be in the classroom, because anyone can record the class at any time and make it viral as soon as possible, as soon as that professor says anything out of kilter. So I'm going to be real interesting to see just how this works and if it does work, just what that means to the academic establishment, which, guys, I mean, by anyone's estimation, has veered and shifted far, far left over the last several decades.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting point you bring up. Do you think that the value of that degree, we mentioned that Harvard's keeping the same tuition for it. Do you think that value is going to remain there if for the foreseeable future classes remained online and say you weren't even allowed on campus, so pretty much all you're getting is the degree? Do you think that value is still there, and do you think that universities are going to be able to justify charging the same amount for it?
I think certain schools will be able to maintain that.
Yeah, I do too.
Harvard, not maybe not all of the Ivy League, but most of it. And schools like University of Chicago, MIT, Caltech,
Stanford.
I mean, there's the top 20 for all intents and purposes, with a couple of exceptions. You can go anywhere in the world, and someone automatically knows or has heard of that, and it's automatically marketable. I don't think that this changes that much.
No,
I think it's going to be far more difficult for those kind of mid-tier and the secondary schools. And this, I'm not trying to throw anyone underneath the bus, but it's going to be difficult for a Millsaps or a Hendrix or
even bigger ones, just kind of some SEC and Big 12. Just kind of those big schools where the brand name isn't there as much.
Or Bucknell or Gettysburg or something like this. All these are good schools that I've just rattled off, without a doubt, have good reputations. But if everything's online and people aren't going to the campus and you don't have that college experience, the true value of the education, or the perception of it, will easily flatten out amongst, I would say, second tier, although people would take exception. I'm calling them second tier. I don't mean that as second rate. I'm not mean that. I don't mean it as second rate, just second tier off of the top names.
I mean, just think about it. If you offered me, if I could pay the tuition for 4 years to get a degree at Harvard and not learn anything and get nothing except a piece of paper that said I graduated from the University of Harvard, I'd probably still do that.
Oh, yeah.
I would want that piece of paper saying I got a degree from Harvard, or say even a graduate degree or what have you. There's some sets of schools where I would easily justify doing that and paying that exorbitant amount of money for that piece of paper. But then when you get off of that, what we're calling the first tier, there's not a whole lot of reason to pick one over the other. And that's even me coming from an Auburn fan. If I can't have the experience I had at Auburn, that was really my driving force of wanting to go to Auburn, is the environment there and how I loved it, and the people and the culture and everything really outside the education. I knew it was a good education, and I knew I'd be pretty prepared for the working world, but I loved the university. I loved everything outside of the education, which is really what drove my decision. And you take all that away and all you get is a piece of paper, I wouldn't have as much of a reason to choose Auburn, or people might not choose the school that they loved as much if they don't get any of the reasons that they do love it.
Well, it's going to come down increasingly more outside of a certain brand name recognition. It's going to come increasingly down to more price.
Yeah,
and that's
where competing on price, and not as much, I guess, service in a sense.
Product or service, because that product or service with the college degree or college experience is the going to campus, is the football or basketball games, are the fraternities and sororities, if you're so inclined, are the various social groups, and all the activities.
College, really, people that choose. Use an example here. That's why a lot of people choose between Auburn and Alabama, where they're going to go is where they think they fit in more and where they think they'll have more fun. They're not really, for most degrees, looking at the difference between the two degrees.
Yeah. Hey, well, ultimately, what I do think what will happen is, as this trend accelerates across the country, I do think it's going to be difficult for that second-tier sort of private liberal arts school to really make a go of it. I even think of certain campuses that you might not expect, and maybe even my alma mater might struggle a little bit to find a voice if this does go down to its illogical conclusion. And where I think state schools will benefit quite a bit, and you'll see the number of students that are going to an Auburn University. While I know the school has put a peak on it at 25,000, with this they might say 25,000 on campus, but unlimited
Yeah.
online. And so that will make state colleges that much more attractive as opposed to going and spending a little bit more for a degree someplace else and spending additional money for it. So I do believe that this trend, if it does continue, and academia doesn't stop at cold, which I think there's going to be a lot of pressure for it, I do think it'll benefit public universities at the expense of a lot of these smaller private liberal arts schools.
Yeah,
which might have been even a trend already going. This will just accelerate it.
It may have. Yeah, I think that's kind of what we've talked about with a lot of these things is just trends we were already kind of seeing just being expedited and seeing the results of it a lot quicker.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what's kind of interesting, about today's news cycle, in today's media. You have an article like that about Harvard putting all of its classes online, which could shake out and reshape higher education throughout the entire United States. And then, I mean, it's not that difficult to think about it throughout the entire world.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah.
However, it's kind of buried on A2, A3, maybe even A4 behind the headlines of Colin Kaepernick signing a contract with ESPN and behind the tearing down of a statue of Frederick Douglass, and that Hamilton's not woke enough behind Chaz or Chop in Seattle, and just all of this unrest and all this unhappiness and bad vibe, which frankly sells newspapers, and it gets more clicks, likes, and eyeballs than little news stories like Harvard putting everything online, which is and could be easily a defining moment in secondary education for decades.
Yeah, completely agree.
There you have it. Guys, thank you all so much for listening. We'd love to hear from you all. So if you have any questions or comments, please let us know. You can send us an email to tradingperspectives@oakworthcapital.com, or you can leave us a review on the podcast outlet of your choice. If you're interested in hearing more, reading more of what we have to say, you can check out our blog, Common Sense, at oakworthcapital.com underneath the Thought Leadership tab, along with a lot of other good articles and research that the investment committee here at Oakworth has put out there. Sam, as always, I give you the last shot.
That's all I got.
That's all I got today, too. Y'all take care.